Hello everyone. In this video, I would like for us to briefly concern ourselves with the outstanding conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinian people that have been going on for a very long time now. But what I want to do in this video is the way that I want us to concern ourselves with this situation is to understand it from a certain viewpoint and not to go into the intricacies of, the history of why this is happening and really what's been transpiring, especially over the recent past couple of days. But I want to look at this from a viewpoint that I looked at a different situation in the past in the same light. So I made a video not too long ago. It's one of my more popular videos on this channel about worthy and unworthy victims. And I believe in that video, it's been a while since I've watched it. I probably should have rewatched it before making this one. But I made the distinction between what people, namely the West and the United States, classify as worthy victims and what's largely classified among the general population as unworthy victims. And I drew the distinction between the victims of the people in Ukraine because of the Ukraine and Russia conflict. They were worthy victims, victims worthy of the feeling of empathy, the victims that are worthy of help and everything else that comes with that. And then the unworthy victims, I stated, were people like those that the United States bombed away in Afghanistan, in Libya, in Vietnam. Another group of worthy victims, though, these people may not be victims at all. In fact, I've had people tell me that they're not, and it's been backed up by a lot of evidence, but I won't get into that. Is the Uyghur Muslim population that the United States claims suffers greatly at the hands of the People's Republic of China. And so in this video, I would like to kind of do a similar thing. So I drew this from a book called Manufacturing Consent. It's by Edward Herman and Noam Chomsky. I read this book some time ago. I recommend that anyone read it. It's an amazing book, but it talks about this worthy and unworthy victims. And I believe the unworthy victims in this moment in time is indeed the Palestinian people that have suffered for such a great time now. And the worthy victims, of course, are obviously the Israelis. Now, I'm not here to tell you, what's right and wrong in terms of the actions of the people involved in this conflict. Needless to say, any kind of carnage and death is negative and it's not a good thing. But the selective outrage is what I really want to focus on in this video, and who the powers that be deem are those that are worthy of being, of deserving our empathy and everything else. I just think that's, that really needs to be discussed and it needs to be highlighted. So I want to read to you a little bit of what he says here in this book. So it says, a propaganda system will consistently portray people abused in enemy states as worthy victims, whereas those treated with equal or greater severity by its own government or clients will be unworthy. So it's very particular there. So in these enemy states, i.e. Gaza, i.e. the West Bank, that may not really be considered, a state, but I guess a state would be something like Russia, right? If Russia were to come under attack by whoever, say Ukraine, maybe, we would consider the Russians unworthy victims by the standard of the propaganda system that they've outlined here for us. They also go on to say, while this differential treatment occurs on a large scale, the media intellectuals in public are able to remain unconscious of the fact and maintain a high moral and self-righteous tone. This is evidence of an extremely effective propaganda system. And that's what we've been seeing in the news and on social media with the EU, all these, NATO-backed countries, the US itself, and all of their allies condemning, Gaza, excuse me, not Gaza, Hamas, and, supposedly the perpetrators of these attacks, for their actions, while not recognizing, pretty much what has led up to this point. They also go on to say that while the coverage of the worthy victim was generous with gory details and quoted expressions of outrage and demands for justice, the coverage of the unworthy victims was low-keyed, designed to keep the lid on emotions and evoking regretful and philosophical generalities on the omnipresence of violence and inherent tragedy of human life. This qualitative difference is already apparent in the placement of editorializing. So, if you notice in the news coverage and the details and everything that they tell you about what's going on right now as far as the Israeli suffering, and some of these people are innocent, they give you every single detail. It's nonstop coverage. They have death counts. You know the names of these individuals in some cases. But if you look on the opposite side of the spectrum, the other people that are suffering, that have been suffering for such a great deal, for such a great time now, you know hardly anything of their situation. It's not covered. It's swept under the rug. These are the unworthy victims. And it's exemplified in our society. So you have the Israeli defense minister, Yoav Gallant. I know I didn't say that correctly, but he called the Palestinian people quite literally human animals. So they're not even humans. They're animals now, and they're using words like exterminate, annihilation, destroy. Just take a look at this clip from Mr. Lindsey Graham, one of the most war-hungry politicians that exist today.
We're in a religious war here. I am with Israel. Do whatever the hell you have to do to defend yourself. Level the place.
He's advocating for the leveling of the place, as he says. That's the extermination of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people that will just be wiped away. I mean, these people, they're not in their right mind, or maybe they are, and their mind is just so far warped into something that isn't even reality anymore, because these are events that happen over there. They're not happening here. They're not happening wherever these people reside. They're happening somewhere far off into the Middle East, and they don't have to worry about it. You know, as long as their side wins. As he said right there in that video, he stands with Israel. This is a U.S. Congressman by the name of Richie Torres. He tweeted this. He says, Hamas surprise attack by air, land, and sea is Israel's 9/11. Losing 600 Israelis is the equivalent of losing about 20,000 Americans. So an American congressman, a person that was elected to serve me and you, thinks that every Israeli life is worth 30 of ours. This is the kind of stuff that has been circulating in our media, in our airways, on social media for us to read. This is the kind of stuff. And this is the propaganda machine at work. Listen, this has been a spectacle to see. You have the Palestinians. I've seen videos, albeit a lot of it is very gruesome. I mean, they're flying in on these hang gliders or whatever you call them, these contraptions in order to fight back against their enemy. But going forward, we should really pay attention to this. I think this is what's most important, of who deserves what, of who is a worthy victim versus who is an unworthy victim. And I believe that they've made this very clear, which is which. And I'll end the video on this. This is the trend. This is what we've been saying. There is a global shift going on right now, and one may be accurate in saying in that it was kickstarted or jump-started with the war in Ukraine, or the conflict that's currently going on in that part of the world, where things are changing. People aren't just sitting by and letting things happen to them anymore. NATO would like to continue to expand after they were told not to, and this will occur. Well, they continue to, and now they're suffering from their actions, which they were warned about every step of the way. A certain population would like to occupy another and treat them with incredible harm and disrespect. Well, now obviously they're suffering the consequences of those actions. Now, I'm not justifying it. No one can justify death, or war in any sense. You'd be a fool to even attempt to do so. But there are actions and situations that have led us up to this point. I hope that I've been eloquent. I hope that you've been able to understand what I'm saying. But I do think that this is an angle that should be looked at going forward, because it is extremely important in the propaganda machine now more than ever before.